In 1928, the California State Supreme Court ruled that all water use be reasonable and beneficial. 15 years before, at the opening of the Los Angeles Aqueduct, William Mulholland surveyed the LA basin and proclaimed, "There it is, take it." 95 years after Mulholland's proclamation, a little fish put a big crimp in our ability to exploit the land we have at our disposal. It's no great secret that most of the precipitation in the state of California falls in the northern part of the state, or that the majority of the population resides in the southern half. For as long as most of us can remember, we've shipped the northern waters south through a series of canals and aqueducts built during the last century. It's an impressive network of reservoirs, pumping stations, and hydropower plants, all designed to bring water to land where not enough of it occurs naturally. And much of that water comes from the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta. Amazingly, we're not feeding all this water to the cities, or even to the new exurbs bedeviled by foreclosure, those dun-colored rabbit warrens where nobody parks in their driveways for fear of the HOA, the tile-roofed stucco subdivisions where children don't play in the streets. 80% of the water we collect, store, and divert goes to agriculture. Which is why the farmers up and down the San Joaquin Valley have posted Congress-created Dust Bowl signs along the interstate in hopes of arousing sympathy for their latest plight. But what exactly did Congress do? It passed the Endangered Species Act of 1973. The Delta smelt landed on the endangered list in 2008, in the midst of a drought, which put the brakes on water diverted to San Joaquin Valley agriculture. It's not a particularly exotic cause, this smelt. It has none of the majesty of salmon, none of the exoticism of the sturgeon, and its cute factor is somewhere lower on the totem pole than, say, that of the spotted owl. But what it is a pretty reliable bellwether of the health of the Delta ecosystem. That ecosystem itself is in flux. Until the end of the 19th century, it was tidal marshland separating the saltwater of San Francisco Bay from the freshwater inflow of the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers. Then farmers figured out that the peat soil would be fantastic for growing things, if only the land could be isolated and the brackish water pumped out. So they built 1,100 miles worth of levees to keep the fluctuating mixture of salt and freshwater at bay. This forced the delta into a network of sloughs and streams, and as the farmland subsided, it also put the former marshland below the level of the estuary. The levees weren't built to be dams, which is essentially what they've become. If, for example, a heavy quake on the Hayward Fault ruptures sizable chunks of the levees, the resultant ecosystem will look radically different from the way it is today, and from the way it was before. Outside of the Delta community of Byron, right next to the giant Banks pumping plant complex, a small group from UC Davis is working to build up a refugial population of Delta smelt. After all, if they adapted to the changes of 100 years ago and were viable up until recently, it's quite possible they could thrive in such a radically different ecosystem. It's not exceptionally tricky work raising smelt. What it is labor-intensive. Still, the tools are remarkably low-tech. Tubes and bowls and pipettes and plastic tubing, much of it housed in refrigerated shipping containers at the edge of the California Aqueduct. Besides researching the fish, learning more about its behavior and adaptability, the Davis Project works on assuring the genetic diversity of its refugial population, tagging fish, then recapturing pairs that should be mated next to ensure the greatest possible variety in the smelt's gene pool should they need to be returned to the wild. The plight of the smelt ultimately dovetails with the central problem of the way we live in California, and indeed, in much of the western United States. We saw it. We took it. We introduced new species without considering the consequences. We built first and asked questions later. We promised water to agriculture we couldn't reliably deliver. And as we run helter-skelter along a path where we exist less and less with nature, we're more surprised when it strikes back and bites us. The Delta smelt may not be a Hurricane Katrina. It may not be as majestic a cause to get behind as the golden eagle or the California condor. But if you're looking for the crux of an untenable California life, the smelt? Well, the smelt's your unremarkable little fish.